Hi everyone, I'm Promethea, and I'm really happy to represent Amtgard Leadership University today on behalf of Jocelyn, who could not be here with us today. We're going to talk about A&S judging. We're going to get into how tournaments are run, scoring systems, and all that sort of thing. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to just go over the rules of order really quickly. For everybody in the audience, if you just remember to remain respectful, these people have given up their time to be here. Paige is going to be walking around. She can hand out papers, so you can ask questions at any point. She'll bring them up to me and I'll read them. And just a reminder for everybody at the table, no tapping, no clicking anything on the table. The mic is very sensitive and we'll pick that up. So from left to right, I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about your arts and sciences background, and if you could name a couple things you'd like to people have as takeaways off this panel.
My name is Sir Jocelyn Achard. I have won Olympiad a couple of times. I ran Clan Arts and Sciences this year, a couple months ago. I'm a Master Dragon, but I also do a lot of guarding. Some of the stuff that I would like to talk about today would be... Oh man, I had this in my head a second ago. Did you write this down? Oh, you're so nice. Thank you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is anonymity. Basically, whether or not that can be expected, whether or not you should be trying for that, and how to deal with it when you know that that can't be achieved. I also want to talk about preparing for A&S and what you should be getting set up ahead of time and having prepared well in advance of actually coming to the competition. And there was something else, but we'll come back to that.
Hi, I'm Diana Starfall. I am also a Serpent Knight of the Master Dragon variety. Did Arts and Sciences Cultural Olympiad twice. I helped Petra run the Olympiad here a couple years back. I run a lot of tournaments in Golden Vale, and I'm really passionate about how we set up judges and scoring and everything else, so I'm really excited to be here today. Two things that I wanted to talk about. Little pet peeve, we've tried a lot of different scoring systems in the past. One thing I see happening in a lot of places still are when we have scoring systems that correlate directly with award numbers, and it runs into our issue with A&S culture bleeding into awards culture, and sometimes people will see their scores and it will automatically begin a conversation of, do I get an award for this because I got a certain score? So separating the two to make sure that our arts are independent of any other sort of accolation. And then the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I can't read Kate's handwriting, resources. So kind of going along with the idea of prepping our judges and ways to help people get ready for tournaments, we talk a lot about judges who have blind spots, people who have that entry that they walk up on and they don't really know how to approach that art form, and we don't have enough judges to say, have specific judges for categories. I've been a part of several teams that have talked about solving this in the past, of creating a guide for judging. And we talk about it, and then it never really quite pans out to the scale and the scope that I think Amtgard is capable of. So I'd love to see some sort of organization within the A&S community so that we can power our judges. If we're doing pre-registrations and we're getting people to talk about what they're bringing, judges could bone up on those subjects before the weekend. So that's my thoughts on that.
I'm Sue Petra from the Iron Mountains, originally from Goldenville. I've run tournaments in 5 or 6 different kingdoms, depending on how you're counting. Promethea, Clan, a lot. My big thing in judging a tournament culture is you're going to be ready to fail. Be ready to fail a lot. Be ready to get upset about it and have others upset at you about it. But also be ready to do better the time with it. The other one is judge ease. You're not going to get judges, and you're certainly not going to get talented judges unless you're making the process easy on them. If your contests take too long, if you're demanding too much and not providing anything back, you're not going to do well.
So I'll start off with one that might be really straightforward. So, I'm at the Shire level. I need to run a crown qualification, and I'm going to need judges. How do I pick my judges? Like, where do they come from? What kind of what kind of qualifications do you look at for judges, and is it different at a Shire level than it is at a Kingdom or an Inter-Kingdom level?
For Shire level, my assumption would be that my pool of people to pick from is pretty small. If possible, I might reach out to other parks in the Kingdom that are nearby if they have any master craftsmen or serpent knights, or even just craftspeople who are doing good work, and ask them to travel to come judge. Or just find people who have any kind of knowledge for arts and sciences, or people who are willing to learn. And if the person who's running it, if you have that expertise, find people who you think you could help and coach and give instruction to, and then they could take it and go judge.
If I've got 5 judges, what I'll usually aim for is hopping in at a Shire level. I usually would both run the tournament and hop in myself. Get 1, maybe 2 other people who are mid to high-end crafters, either endgame on their ladder or masters or other knights. And then I'll try to get 1 or 2 people who are relatively newer. So either people from the local park or baronies or duchies nearby that want to learn more about the judging system. That way they can kind of see and shadow and watch what the more experienced judges are doing, but also pick up some new skills. It also means we're getting a range of critical levels, and that way you have some people who might provide new perspective, and that can be a really good balancing factor once you get into your averaging. So.
Also consider reaching out into your community that isn't Amtgard, quilters groups, 4-H. A lot of the people who judge those sorts of things have judging skills in other areas and have strong craft interests that may not be strong enough to get them into a game like ours. You could create some real connections with your local SCA group. If you could get maybe one of their laurels to come and teach some of your Shire judges. And then you've got a great crop of judges for next time you need your calls, things like that.
So let's assume that we get a nice crop of really talented judges, and then we get we might be at a park where nobody quite has those awards, or they're isolated, so they can't get those master level and like knighthood level candidates in. How do you handle, in either case, judges rating something far too low or far too high when they don't have an understanding of that category?
This is generally why I go with 5 judges. That way I can drop high and low if it becomes a recurring issue across the scores, across the entirety of the tournament. So I do look for trends. This is why spreadsheets are your friend. If you're running A&S, it's one of the best things that you can do. So you can run some numbers to see your median, your mode, your recurring themes. So that's one option. It is really hard when you cut low and high because you may still have some outliers, so it's not always going to solve every problem. And as I said previously in the last section, like sometimes those other perspectives are helpful. So you kind of have to look into the comments, see why people scored that way, and if it's really off base, I have been known to pull someone mid-tournament and kind of say, okay, give me an idea of what you're going for here, because I've noticed this trend, and before we get too far, I'm usually following behind with the cards, keeping an eye out, and if I see something emerging that I think we can curb, I might pause and pull them aside. I'm usually either the very first one done judging or the very last one because of these kinds of situations.
I'm a big fan of group judging. When you have your judges not share scores, not look at each other's score sheets, but share information with each other. Share the things that they're seeing that maybe other judges that aren't looking at the same time might not see. Judges who have more expertise in an area then get the chance to teach the other judges a little bit while also judging. I'm big on combining as many things as possible, and that's a really easy thing.
So we're gonna again dive into what do you do if you don't have specialists in a category? How do you get judges to understand a little known art form so it can be judged fairly? Or how do you, as a judge who knows nothing about a medium, work it out so that you can judge it based on its merits, even if you're not fully familiar with how it works?
I encourage judges to talk to each other. I ideally would like to set it up so that I explain to the judges that I want them to discuss it, but rather than saying, I think this is good, I think this is bad, talk among each other about what someone who knows about it would look for and allow the judges to form their own opinions while still educating them on what to look for?
I haven't been able to do this in all tournaments because honestly you're going to be on a time crunch. It's going to happen. But something that can be really helpful if you can budget the time for it, talk with your judges before the tournament starts and ask them what their weaknesses are. So if you sit with your 5 people and you're like, okay, who's got a weakness with writing, or who is unsure about how to judge performance. If you can talk about it a little bit before you get into the tournament, that way they don't go into the section of judging with some preconceived notions, or you don't get that little bit of bleed that you do when you joint judge. Like, I like it when you have a group of experienced judges group judging, because people can keep their own opinions and they feel confident enough in their own interpretation of the subject to talk about it. But if you've got newer people and they're really unsure, sometimes they're just going to echo and mirror what the other more experienced judges have said. So in those cases, poll people beforehand, and pull your thoughts, and talk a little bit about the medium and what you can share, and just give them some ideas. And they can jot down some notes, okay, when I'm listening to performance, think about pacing, think about tone, think about pitch or piece choice, and all of those things. Like, you can give them some ideas and hope to mitigate any extreme knowledge gaps.
So into best practices for tourney runners, this is where pre-reg is your friend. If you're allowing entrants to pre-register their items, then you already know what categories they're intending to enter, and you already know what media they're entering. So if there's something like a Tamari ball, you can go and print out some stuff on Tamari and give it to your judges ahead of time, or link them to a page that will allow them to learn about that of themselves. Even if you get to the event and people are entering these oddball things that you're not expecting, Google's your friend. Don't be afraid of it. Open it up right there. Go look at the best in that medium if you've never seen it before, and then look at that piece. Look at how they did the fundamentals of what you just saw done really well.
And kind of to go off that, I think this is also an opportunity for us as a community to think about how we can be coaching entrants to write better sheets to submit with their art. Because if people are giving us better write-ups that not just talk about, I made this, these are the materials, but talk about the concept of that medium. If you're doing something obscure, like, don't tell me how you made a tea tunic. I think the average person's going to get that. But if you're doing Tamari, if you're doing stained glass, if you're doing digital art, if you're doing something that requires a little bit of information for the average person to understand, then give us those details. Even if it's a couple research links, even if it's some video tutorials or something that gives us a perspective of what that medium entails, that will help the judges and therefore run better tournaments. So if we can coach people to be better about that, that's another way to make it easier.
So I want to come back to talking about write-up content, but I had one question that I want to ask, just going back to judging practice and standard. When, Katie, you were talking about doing high-low, so dropping the highest or the lowest score if there's an outlier that's really far above the average, do you keep comments on judges when their scores are dropped? So if a judge has left comments and you decide their scores aren't valid because they're high-low, do you keep the comments they left behind and pass those on?
So I can think of one case that we did drop high-low, and I feel like I could talk about this scenario because it was a case of my husband entering and my squire at the time and past judging, and Amy was giving that almost perfect scores across the board, and I pulled her aside after the end of the tournament. We talked about what happened, and I did drop high-low in that tournament. And it was actually different judges in different sections of the tournament who had judged really outlier high or low, so I felt pretty justified in doing it. And I did pass on the comments, but I did also announce publicly that we had made the choice to drop high-low, so that when people were looking at their comments, they'd understand 5 comments, only the middle 3 scores had been kept. So it gave them a little bit of perspective if they got a super harsh or critical, or really like, I don't really know what to do with this comment feedback, they'd have an idea that's probably the score that got dropped.
And I have, I want to jump off a second to talk about that high-low thing, dropping high-low. Ever since I started kind of doubting the concept of drop high-low, I have run numbers and looked at graphs and all that for every single tournament competition set of data that I have found. 40 to 50 sets of data. Your French judges are always more French than your Russians are Russian. People think the Russian that you need to worry about the Russian judge, the one that is scoring really hard. They're not scoring as low as your high scorer is scoring every time.
That's interesting data.
To go back to write-ups for a second, how much and what type of information should go in a write-up? And follow-up, is there anything you really shouldn't put into a write-up? And I know that Katie, you talked about that a little, so I'll let you jump off on that, but I really want to hear from Jocelyn after this, because we haven't heard from her in a minute.
So there are a lot of schools of thought on this, and I've heard really convincing cases on both sides. I know personally, like, the biggest thing that you can do is don't tell the judges what you did wrong. Don't point out or highlight or emphasize mistakes. We probably know. And when people do that, you're going to skew the judges in like their initial feelings when they're looking at the piece. They're going to be like, this person knows they did something wrong. So what are they going for when they are entering it? Are they just looking for feedback to do better? Like, what is the purpose of them entering this tournament if they know it's not their best work? So that's one. I've heard really conflicting sides on how much money someone spent, how much time someone spent. It could take a really talented professional crafter like an hour. You can see Kat make a tunic, and you're like, well, she's done in 15 minutes. Whereas an equally quality tunic that's made in 3 hours doesn't really matter whether it was done in an hour or 3. That's not really what matters. It's the quality of the tunic, not how fast someone did it. So it doesn't really help. And it can sometimes hurt your case. And same thing with money. Like, someone invests a huge amount, that can be impressive, but it doesn't really have to do with the quality. If someone can source materials, if someone is really good at thrift shopping and can find what they need on a budget, I could be impressed that they made, a beautiful Tudor ensemble of entirely, secondhand sourced items. That's impressive, but all I really need to know is the quality of the piece that's being entered. So talking about your process, talking about choices. If you know the rules for a certain writing form dictate X, and you break it intentionally because you are trying to convey Y, explain that to me in your write-up, because that's what matters to me. Your thought, your design process, your concept, and then if you're doing an obscure medium, tell me a little bit about that medium so I know what I'm looking for.
I'm going to try not to repeat you. Everything she said. Do not include your name. Do not include any proper nouns that are going to give yourself away unless the competition has specified that it is not anonymous. Most competitions, the judges expect to not know who the entrant is, and they will dock you if you say, I made this for my Squire brother so-and-so, and the judge knows, well, they only have one Squire sibling, so obviously this person made it. So don't include name. Only include materials if the source of them in some way contributes to the project or contributes to how difficult it was to make or achieve. So don't say, well, I spent $20 on this brocade at Joann's. That's not relevant to your project. But if you say, I went to 10 thrift stores every week, and I managed to get these materials, and I had to cut it out and piece it together so I had enough, that's impressive. That's going to add to the difficulty of your piece, and it's going to help you. Basically include information that if the judges know it, they will be more impressed. If the judges know it and it doesn't impact the final product, maybe leave that out.
And to kind of go back on that, the other clarification I'd make on materials is, so one tournament I made a pouch, and it was a leather hand-sewn pouch, and there was twine involved, and there was a resin cast clasp. And one of the judges came back and they were like, I don't know if you cast this clasp or if you bought this clasp. Yeah. So if there's clarification like that, it will help if you say, like, yes, I cast this, or bought materials list of items versus made materials. Like, if I dyed my linen, I bought white unbleached linen, but I, got this gorgeous shade of purple by mixing XYZ dyes. Like, it's process, it's clarification on materials, but I don't need to cite how long it took me to dye it or how much I spent on the linen. Like, just give me the process and why it's special that you're singling it out.
This is particularly important if you bought something that could have been made, or if you made something that could have been bought. That's when you really do make sure that you clarify that for the judges in your write-up.
Another one that comes up a lot of the time is first attempt.
Yeah.
First
attempt
that's,
or 50th?
Yeah, whether it's your first attempt or 50th, it's not that it shouldn't change how the judge looks at your piece.
So when you're on your crafting journey, you're coming up and you're doing all these different levels of tournaments, how do you break a stuck spot when you don't get enough feedback? And make a change in order to improve yourself and go forward. And how do you get that name recognition when you go out of an area so people respect you as a crafter? Because that can be a very important part of how people look at your work. So let's take it with the first part. How do you break out of a stuck spot when you don't have enough feedback and you're not sure what the next step is? You don't know how to get from that 6th dragon to that 7th dragon.
This isn't necessarily a problem that I faced because I'm a researcher. Like, I obsessively research everything. That's what I love doing. So at any given point on my journey, I was doing something and I was already looking like, well, once I figured this out, there's this cooler thing I can do next. So that's not really something that I ran into, so I'm not sure I have anything to contribute.
I think that for people who are leaving a tournament feeling like they didn't get enough feedback, a lot of tourney runners do pride themselves in finding judges that are open to one-on-ones. So if you get through a tournament and you feel like you really didn't understand the feedback or get enough that was constructive, reaching out to, even if you don't feel comfortable approaching the judges themselves, talk to the tourney organizer and see if you're not getting enough out of tournaments, then reaching out to Serpent Knights in your community, reaching out to masters, that's a great way to start finding out more. Finding the people who are movers and shakers in your medium is a good way to do it. Becoming a researcher is always a good way to do it. In the Nine Blades, in our principality, we have some players who have particular aesthetics that are on the surface simpler, and therefore they don't want to move into garb that's super hyper embellished and flashy and over the top. So we talked about backtracking your art. So if you're going to make me a simple Viking ensemble, getting into dyeing and getting into the trims and the jewelry pieces and the accessories and fleshing out your entries from the back end instead of making the final display what pops. But that kind of gets away from tourneys and into some A&S practices. So if you have some of those questions, also come up to the encouraging A&S panel next.
What do you do? So let's just touch on that for a little bit more. What do you do if you're getting that feedback and you're actioning that feedback and you're not getting improved marks? So you're doing the feedback. You get to a point where you are comfortable in your own medium, but other people don't. You feel that you've improved, but other people don't. How do you break out of that?
Travel. If you're not seeing it in your own community, go to other communities and get other opinions. Seek another opinion. So, your kingdom may not have someone who's working in your medium and may not have the experience. Maybe people don't travel out to where you are and where you're working. So go find other people who do know. And talk to some of the people on A&S Anonymous. Talk to some of the people in the Amtgard boards online. Find out where those niche areas are, where if you work in millinery and you need someone to judge your hats who gets hats, find out who the person is and go to their tournament or send stuff. There are a lot of tourney organizers now who will accept shipped items under the understanding that it's going to be handled by someone else, it's going to be sent back by someone else. But I sent racers to the Olympiad in Iron Mountains like 7 years ago, and I didn't know anybody out there. Then I just sent them on a hope and a prayer that they'd get back to me, and they did. Like, Amtgard in general is a community like that. So send your stuff out, seek another opinion, get other ideas.
Don't limit yourself to Amtgard. Like I mentioned this at the beginning too. Like, we are all nerdy. We are all researching and doing the same crafts. Talk to the SCA. Talk to Bell or Dag artisans. Go online and find medieval reenactment communities in Europe that have been doing this for literally hundreds of years. So,
online resources. Send it out. Like, send pictures of your work out. Put your portfolio on DeviantArt. Get a Facebook group based on your art and put it out there. And get crafters interested in what you're doing and ask them what they think.
If, let's say you picked up, to use your example, millinery, and Amtgard judges, no one in Amtgard knows hats. Like, this just isn't something they understand. Start teaching classes. Start teaching everyone what makes a good hat, how you make hats. Let them try it. Let them see just how difficult it is. Judges will start being able to appreciate millinery.
So to use that as kind of a segue, let's say you have a unique like style, or you're known for a standard field that you enter repeatedly. How do you handle anonymity at a judging level when you can recognize somebody's style on the spot?
So first, as a tournament organizer, when I'm looking for judges, I'm not going to ask someone to judge if I don't trust them to tell me if they can't be unbiased when judging. I'm not going to ask someone to judge who I don't think that if I told them, hey, if there's something you don't feel you can judge fairly, let me know, that they wouldn't come forward. Anonymity is really hard, particularly once you start doing high-level stuff, or get known for your work, or just have a distinctive style. So once you get to that point, anonymity is not something that you can realistically achieve, so you need to address it in different ways. You need to address it in educating judges on recognizing bias in themselves, educating judges and tournament organizers on how to deal with bias when it comes up, and having backup plans in place so that if a judge or an organizer starts seeing bias, there's some way to deal with it, or pull in an extra judge just for those 3 items that judge number 2 can't judge because it's their husband or whatever.
I think checking your bias is huge. We talk about it in the real world all the time, in work and hiring scenarios and everything else. So I think that having that conversation actively with the judging community in your kingdom, that's really worthwhile. High-end judges, like once you're at kingdom level and inter-kingdom level, you really should be picking the people who can judge anything. I joke with Matt all the time that I judge his entries the worst across the board. I always give him the worst. But it's also the scores he would give himself, and I know this, and he said it himself as well. So like, you have to be able to be just as hard on a spouse or a company member as you would anybody else. So it's going to reflect. I think it's really important to notice bias by looking at the judges' scores across the tournament, and if they're consistent with their numbers across the board based on the relative level of skill of the tournament, you've got a pretty good idea that your judges are biased. I wouldn't hate to see, this kind of goes off one of Kate's stomping grounds about failure. I'd love to see postmortems after tournaments. It's something we do in the theater world, talking about what went well, what didn't go well. It's really something we should be doing in general with any kind of event in Amtgard. Talking about what we learned and what can we action next time to make it better. And part of that is looking at your judges, knowing the numbers, and if you saw someone who was squeaking into a range of bias, you talk to that judge afterwards and be like, hey, so I noticed a trend with your scores. It went up when you were judging anything from this particular company, or anything that had this insignia on it. Like, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. We should be open enough to admitting these things to each other and having that transparency to clean it up for the next time, because we owe each other that level of respect.
I want to jump in really quick and point out that bias sometimes isn't what you expect. The expected is that you're going to give the people you like better scores than the people you don't like worse scores. I end up being biased the other way because I know I'm going to be biased. So if your sweetheart is entering the A&S, you have to make sure that you're not judging them too well or too poorly, because it can go either way.
So my personal feeling is that anonymity is this like artificial construct. It's this clear wall built by a mind that we put up like 10 or 15 years ago, long before I started. And this is another like data pool thing. Having seen tournaments in areas where there is that very artificial wall between the judges and the entries, and seeing tournaments in areas where that's not the case, there are so many more hurt feelings, so many more grudges, so much more drama, so much more angst, and about scores, and about judging, and about, are you truly being fair? Once you remove that wall, people see each other for okay, that's a good judge. So you start seeing each other for what you are based on the skills, and it becomes less of an issue.
Clarifying, you mean anonymity of judges, not anonymity of entrance.
I mean either.
Either? Okay.
And I think that when you take out the anonymity, you open it up for a lot more valuable dialogue between entrants and judges, which both will benefit from.
I'm all for anonymity, like no anonymity with judges. I understand there's some communities that still strive for it with entrants. I come from a small community, so it's not really possible where we are. I can probably identify the art of everyone on every table at most events that I go to in the 9 place. So it's not really realistic for us. But I see what you mean.
Do you think that, Petra, do you think that the level of removing that wall between the groups, do you think that would prevent people from being kind of keyboard cowboy and writing things? Do you think it would change the comments that people leave if they knew that comments would be attributed to them?
It's a lot easier to talk crap about a judge who gave you a bad score when you don't know who that judge is. They could be an expert in that field you just entered. You don't know. Once you know exactly who gave you that score and you're talking to them in depth about why they gave you that score instead of just 2 or 3 sentences, I do think that's beneficial to them.
And I think it allows judges to defend their position and really give, and if the person's open to talking, give more detail than we're going to write on a card. Because on a card, I don't want to say it's text-based language, but we're not going to write most people a novel. I mean, we don't have the time. So if we're open about who's judging and how we're feeling, it lets people know, if you want to know more about this, come find me and we'll talk about it.
And if a judge knows that they're going to be held accountable for their scores and their comments with their name attached, they're more likely to be aware of their biases and other issues that they are bringing to the table.
How do you combat those same biases in regions where there is a scale that is judged higher or lower based on the type of people you have there? For example, in a region, applique scoring really highly because you don't see a lot of it, or applique being marked really harshly because you see a ton of it because maybe you have some excellent crafters. How do you work to just dismantle bias when it comes to regional favorites or unfavorites?
I think it comes back to educating judges.
Yeah, and a lot of that education is seeing and keeping. There are a set of folders on A&S Anonymous for specific award levels, so you can see kind of a progression. If you're looking for that kind of feedback,
that goes back to one of my pet peeves where I try to separate the awards and the scoring of A&S because there are some kingdom-based differences in those folders based on what is worthy in one kingdom versus what is worthy in another.
But I think that's important to see what's important in what area, so that you can see where your area is the one that's deficient.
Well, yes, if we're showcasing and highlighting that, but that's if people are looking at where the people are from that are posting their pictures. So if people are research-based, they might be able to distill that from the folders.
I say deficient specifically because of the applicants.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I think having a more open dialogue goes along with the idea of postmorteming, talking about where you see trends starting to happen in your community. There are definitely kingdoms that have preferences for certain mediums, so I don't think it's necessarily something that I don't hear a lot of people talking about it right now, so it's probably something we need to be paying more attention to and actioning in the future. I honestly haven't had too many experiences where we've actually, as a group, whether it be a set of parks or kingdom-wide, talked about what we're doing with certain art forms.
I mostly hear about biases where just some kingdoms are harder on A&S as a whole than others. I haven't had much experience with a specific medium being judged more harshly than others in a kingdom.
Do you feel that giving or recommending low-level awards for first items is the right way to foster A&S? So, as an example, I've made my first tunic. It is certainly a tunic. Do you think that making sure that person gets an award, even though it might not be, it might not meet the requirements of that award, but it's something that is their first item entered? Do you think that that's a positive or a negative way to encourage, or do you have other suggestions on how you can encourage people when they're reaching for those lower level awards rather than up in the masterhood area?
We went into detail in the ALU panel on A&S mastership or masterhood. My thoughts on it is that if you make a tunic, it does not matter the skill level put into it. You should get your first garber. The first 1, 2, maybe 3, just give them to the people because that's going to get them hooked. Once they have 2 garbers, they're gonna be like, this is awesome. Okay, I understand. I have to push myself to do better for the next one, and that's kind of how it gets started. Be really free in giving with those first and second level awards.
I think this is a little more appropriate for the Encouraging A&S panel next, but I think that in terms of tournaments, my hope is that you've already given them, the locals have already dealt with the first through thirds before they're even entering tournaments. Like, if the person is coming to a tournament to enter, it should be one of 2 things has happened. They're in their first month of Amtgard and they just happen to have a tournament and no one's had a chance to award them yet. Or we need to be talking to the officers about, hey, you're missing out on these people that are coming in. They're entering in tournaments with the goal of getting noticed. Why aren't they getting noticed without tournaments? Because a tournament shouldn't determine whether or not someone is noticed. It can be a great way when you're moving from park level awards to kingdom level awards, but to start out, if your officers aren't seeing it, then you kind of have to address the officer thing, not necessarily the tourney culture.
So when I'm taking care of my write-ups and I'm trying to do my best to explain the medium and how I got there and the process involved, when I take a shortcut that leads to the same result, should I mention it? So if I've done something that would make my process overall faster, but it's not the traditional way it's done or it's not the typical way, should I mention it or should I leave it out?
If you genuinely get a result of comparable value, absolutely.
Yeah, I think as long as the quality is the same and you know for a fact that doing it the other way and doing it the way you did would produce the same result, yeah, that's smart. Tell us about it. But if it's tricky and sneaky and might not actually have made your project better, that's a personal judgment call. It could backfire on you.
So I want to give you some time after this question to go into some scoring system comments because I do want to touch on favorite scoring systems, what you like to do, because I know that all 3 of you can speak to that quite well. But just a sort of general A&S question, what advice do you have for someone looking to make a great kit for a peasant or otherwise sort of improved character? We want to put together a really, really high-end kit for something. What kind of advice do you have to be able to show that off and to make it look quality?
Think head to toe. Garb, when people hear garb, they tend to think tunic. But garb can be hat, undercap, tunic, vest, jacket, scarf, belt, girdle, pants, leg wraps.
Depending on what kind of peasant you are, you get into accessories, tools.
Yeah.
There's a whole shoes. Oh,
Layers.
Yes.
Layers.
Don't be afraid to get into some fun pre-work. So you're distressing, dyeing, painting. Oh yeah, like all of your trims and little accessories. Like you can make a subtle trim or edging that still looks lower class, but adds a bit of finishing. Have fun with it, and don't necessarily think of it as I don't know. I get really worried when people. I just want people to get excited. Get excited about the project and dream about it. Be happy about it, and these ideas will come to you. Don't necessarily stress about what we want to see. When you're thinking about it in terms of entering a tournament, don't do what the judges want you to do, what you think they're expecting. Surprise them. Do something sneaky and hidden in the garb that's special and has meaning and is fun and creative, and it's not what we're anticipating. Because those wow moments, those I didn't think of that, I could tell you what to do, but I'm going to be way more excited about your entry if I get into it and I'm like, oh man, they did this really neat thing. There's some really sincere thought that went into this handkerchief. They're a peasant and they have a handkerchief from their sister that they made when they were little, and there's a story to it. You can do a little accessory bit that sells the whole ensemble.
And when you're getting started, even if you're getting started in entering competitions, don't try to get to this perfect thing that you have in your head. Make stuff. Just start making stuff and your style will develop, your skills will develop, and you will get to the point where you're doing more advanced stuff. But if you start off expecting your first piece to be this flawless technical item, you're just going to get stuck. So go for quantity right at first, and the quality will build.
go for quantity, but talk to everybody who will talk to
Yes.
you. Yeah.
And
Even if they're not good at it, you'll learn what not to do. Yeah.
And measure that with a level of don't judge yourself on someone else's yardstick. So don't go to a tournament and look at what other people are entering with the idea of comparing your work to that. You can go to get an idea of what's out there. You can go to get an idea of how better ways to present your stuff, but don't go and say, oh, I'm going to take my stuff home because it's not like that other piece. Because you are going to learn, you're going to get functional feedback, you're going to have an experience that makes you a better artisan, and like it's very important that you keep on doing and don't get stuck and don't necessarily look at someone who comes into the game and is producing these full sets and think that that's natural, that that's what everyone should be doing. Because there are some people who had to make 1,000 tunics before they were good at applique. There are some people who had to sing 1,000 songs before they could get up confidently in a bardic circle. So don't worry about coming in fully formed, because there's some people who can't do that, and that's wonderful, and thank the world for them because they show us what can happen, but don't say that that has to be how you do it either.
So starting with Petra, I want to get into something that I think you can all speak, like I said, very passionately about. I want to talk about scores and comments. Assembling scores, favorite score systems, and when you're done, how do you get them out to people?
Assembling scores, I'm really big on toolbox. If it's not in a spreadsheet, I don't entirely trust the results. That spreadsheet can be one that you network so that judges can put in scores live in real time. It can be one that you use just regularly. Just make sure that you're using a spreadsheet. So far as a specific scoring system, I'm a big fan right now of the way the Plan A&S is being run, just having categories and just straight ranking those categories. Because often I find that the score is the thing that people get hurt about, and what they really need to improve is the feedback. So a straight ranked scoring system kind of takes the sting out of getting the score you didn't want, but it still gives you the feedback.
Okay, so scoring systems, I like varieties of tournaments. I like weird tournaments because we have CQs, and CQs are your strict, I'm running for office basically, or I've got stuff that I want to enter because I want things noticed. So like in Golden Mill, or in Nine Blades, we do like a pass-fail 1 to 5. Sweet, simple, keep it easy for your judges. But then I do another tournament once a year in Nine Blades that is like a 100-point scoring system, and there are like 10 points for your design and concept process, and 10 points for your preparation and layout. And it's easy for the judges because everything's compartmentalized. You hear 100 points, you're like, oh my god, I can't even imagine. But there's a sheet, and it's like you circle numbers, and then you write your comments, and you get to really break down the minutia that goes into an entry. But then you also have your Dragon Masters that should stick to a more standardized system. So I like playing with numbers. I think as a tournament organizer, you have to think of what kind of outcome am I looking for in this tournament? Do I want to know who can beat other crafters of their skill level? Do I want to know who can be the standout best in show singular entry? Do I want to know who can perform well across a variety of craft categories? And then do I want to know, do they need to be both proficient across the board, but also have a minimum number of entries? Like, there's so many different, it's like designing a battle game. Think of designing a tournament the way you approach creating a game. Figure out how many people you have. Figure out what kind of, like, are you doing a 7-category spread? Are you doing a 23-category spread? Are you going to count subcategories ranking, or are you going to just do main category ranking? There's so many ways to get to different results. I think that Dragon Master should be consistent. I think that CQ should be just for passing for office, basically. And then I think you should have a smattering of really fun tournaments that encourage your community to be creative. So I like a little bit of everything. And then comment compiling. Big tournaments where you have the ability to do your spreadsheets, great. Do spreadsheets. They're the best way to prove that you've got everything in one place, that you get them out to a large number of people. If you go the card route, if you do not have the technology to have everything online, and you're doing judging cards, do your best to give them out before the event ends. Do not take them home with you. Please don't take them home with you. I cannot tell you how many times I've been scanning sheets and sending them to people a month or two down the line, because once you leave, that event is over. And it makes it so much harder when a week later you're in the middle of event funk and you are upset about everything, and now you have a pile of cards that you need to email to people or catch them at events and give them their physical cards. Give the physical cards out before you leave. Do it. It will make you happier.
So I don't have nearly as much tournament running experience as either of these ladies.
What do you prefer to see?
So I'm going to start with the worst. Don't do bracketed. Bracketed A&S is awful.
Unless it's best of the best.
No, best of the best bracketed is still awful. Every single time I've seen bracketed A&S scoring, it's come out, and even the judges are like, yeah, I'm not sure that, okay, I guess that's how it came out, but...
Can you go a little more into depth about bracketing for like maybe people who haven't seen that in a tournament before?
Bracketing is the same way that like a fighting tournament is run, where two items are put against each other, and the judges are asked which of these two is better, and they pick one and it goes to the next level. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Standard scoring systems, like the 1 to 5 for crown calls, is what people are used to. If you need to throw a tournament together, that's probably the way to go, just because people know how it works. Or at least they're more likely to know how it works than something more out there. The best scoring system that I've worked with is what Petra mentioned, which is how Clan does it, where within each broader category, or however you want to split the categories, excuse me, it's simply ranked 1 through 10. From what I've seen, that's the best way to get accurate placement and good feedback and stuff like that. As far as comments go, I personally really like having typed up comments. I don't particularly care if someone else did that or if I do that. But for the one tournament that I ran, I had everything set up in a spreadsheet way ahead of time, and I was able to enter scores and comments pretty much as the judges handed the sheets in to me, so I at least followed your advice and got the comments up before I left the event.
Can you give an example of a good comment versus a bad comment? Because you've either received them yourselves in tournament maybe, or because you've seen them on cards that have come through. Can you give an example of first something good that you might find constructive, and then something bad, something that will not be helpful to the artisan at all?
Good comments are ones that are constructive and specific. If you look at this piece and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing, you can tell them how amazing it is, but tell them you like this technique, or you like this color scheme, or you like something specific. Because I had a judge whose comments were almost entirely, this is awesome!
Good job. Thanks.
This is great! Beautiful job! And while that's great for an entry to hear, it doesn't really serve the purpose of comments. Bad comments are no comments. Please give me something. Bad comments are vague. Just me. Yes, me. Don't go that direction. Constructive is one thing. If you have a piece and you're like, well, I don't really have anything nice to say about this, don't trash on it. Say, hey, why don't you look at improving this skill set? That is how you turn a mean comment into something valuable.
And another thing for good commenting, make it Googleable. Like if you are telling them that they are doing something poorly or that they could do something better in a more exciting way, give them search terms. It's the easiest way to make sure that someone can get to their improvement as quickly as possible without having to really like mentally struggle over how we need to take action on your advice.
If it's not an area of your expertise, think very carefully about, I don't want to say making things up, but like winging it. If you are going to give a comment that is a perspective, make sure that you include that, I personally found that food is a really good example. If someone makes me a dish with cilantro in it, I'm going to do my best to judge it, but cilantro to me tastes like soap. So I'm going to say in my card, hey, so personal judging thing, this is an ingredient that can cause a lot of problems. these are some of the things I liked, these are some of the things I didn't like, but just so you know, when you enter this, you're going to have some people who are going to struggle with judging this. Let us know ahead of time, maybe we can sub someone in, but like make sure that person understands why what they did made it difficult to judge. So I think comments that give people an idea of your mind as a judge, judges can't teach entrants to be better entrants in your comments. So you can take that opportunity to not just coach someone on how to be a better artisan, but how to be a better tourney person. So those I think are good and helpful. Bad, yeah, the non-specific is really awful. The nice, good job. I mean, yes, you're helping someone in the sense that you're building up their confidence, but you're not giving them any reason why. So it's kind of empty. Be careful about contradicting yourself within the tournament. So, you give a comment early on in the day, and then through conversation with the other judges, if your comment changes or something else that you learn is different, go back and fix the first one, because I've had issues where one judge, say we use colored pens to denote someone's judging, and two people are talking and they're comparing their scores, and one person's armor gets X comment and the other person's armor gets Y comment. Those comments don't make sense coming from the same person. Careful of your consistency. It will ruin your credibility as a judge. Don't be afraid to go back and change a comment if you really need to.
How do I get people to want to judge arts and sciences tournaments? They can be difficult, scoring systems aren't necessarily uniform, you may be very concerned as a person that you don't know enough about enough of the categories. How do you foster volunteerism in A&S?
Make it easy, make it short, take care of them. If your scoring system is one that is really complicated, you might have some trouble finding judges who are excited to score on it. If it's a new system that you can't really speak to the benefits of, you may not have people excited to use your system. Make it short. Again, choose your system to be one that doesn't necessarily require 5 to 10 minutes of dedicated judging per item. Or if you do want to do something like that, make sure that you have time for it. Make sure that you split it up into different days even. And take care of your judges. Yeah, water, food. Always have a runner if there's going to be a meal during judging. If there might be 2 meals during judging because you're going long, maybe have someone bring in some alcohol if that's what your judges like. If you're right at the end of judging, a glass of whiskey in the hand might make those last items a little bit easier to get through.
Swag was something we've done in the past. Gifts for your judges. Make sure you give them a shout out, even if it doesn't happen at event court. If you do a post after the event thanking them personally, even if those people can't be awarded because they're too high on their ladder or whatnot, just a thank you. Note about appreciating them can go a long way. If you can get it into court, do it at the event, because then the people who were judged can also see, put faces to names. Oh, these are the people that I can talk to if I have a follow-up question. Taking care of your judges, getting people. I think that including people in your design of the tournaments, like getting people in the second you're thinking about running A&S is a good idea. Not corralling people at the event, because if you run into a crunch and you can't find people, you're really stuck. So the second you're thinking you're running a tournament, start talking it up then and finding out who's going to be there, who's available. Break things up if you can. I know a lot of times we just try to marathon through, but more recently at KEEP, I really loved when we have times for judges and then they can go and take a bathroom break and grab a drink and see their friends and feel like they're part of the event and then come back refreshed. Because there is a limit to how much focus. And when you get to that 50th item and you've got another 30 to go, you're brain fried. So give them time to reboot. Because you really want their best work, and you will notice scores will naturally start to dip at the end of an 8-hour judging slog.
It's a personal judgment call, but if your judges are eligible for awards based on the kind of service that they are providing while they are taking 4 or 5 hours out of their event day that they paid to come forward and judge for you, see what you can do with their monarchs. At least get them a shout out at court. I mean, like getting a shout out in your home kingdom at court for something you've done out of kingdom is about the most amazing feeling, because you feel like your work followed you home.
So I do have to wrap it up. If I can definitely give you 30 seconds to talk about it.
The only thing I'm going to add is flatter them. Like, tell them, hey, you're the best person I know to judge weaponry. Would you please, 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 please come judge this for me? I would be eternally grateful for you. And then when you get up to announce the results of court, go, yes, this person, they're awesome. Clap for them. They'll judge for you next time.
So we're going to wind things down. I want to thank you for participating. I'd like to give you each like 1 minute to talk about, because you gave us stomping points at the beginning. Starting with Petra, just 1 minute on some things you want people to definitely have as takeaways from this panel.
There's not a lot of don'ts in A&S. It's all in how you handle it.
I think that there are definitely some topics that we kind of uncovered here that I think are really worth continuing the conversation on. So with some support from Petra, I'm sure we'll tackle this in A&S Anonymous. So get in there, get into the discussion. If you have questions and you're watching this at home, join in the conversation, because I think there are some things that as an A&S community, we are starting to feel the grind of years of putting a lot of Band-Aids on things, and I think it's an opportunity we have to kind of readdress the system and maybe change things up a little bit moving forward. So get to talking to each other, and if you disagree with anything that we've said here, I think we're all very open to people reaching out to us and arguing with us.
Prep work is your friend. Do as much prep work as you can, and specifically within that, things are going to go wrong. Like I said, I've only ran the one A&S competition, and I think I had 3 of my 4 judges bail on me the morning of. So I walked around site and I'm like, hey, would you judge for me? Cool. Would you judge for me? But I had all of this stuff in place that made it so easy for the judges that I could hand them a clipboard and say, hey, I just need you to rank these items 1 through 10, and they're like, cool, I can do that. So all the prep work, and be prepared for things to go wrong, and have contingency plans for them.
So I'd like to just say thank you to the audience, everyone, for attending, and if I could get a round of applause for our wonderful panelists.